First story, Alien Shadows in the Desert, Nevada, 1955. I've never been the type to jump to conclusions or believe in anything beyond what's tangible. That was until the day I witnessed something I still can't explain. This isn't some spooky tale you hear around a campfire. It's something real, something I lived through, and I'm only sharing this now because I can't get it out of my head. It happened during a routine test. We were in the Nevada desert, stationed for some nuclear test drills. The air was dry, heavy with the scent of dust, and the silence out there was eerie. The military had been conducting these tests for years, and everyone knew what to expect. Or so I thought. I was a part of the support team, not directly involved in handling the detonation, but we were there in case something went wrong. It was just another operation. At least that's what I kept telling myself. That day, I remember the heat was almost unbearable. The ground was baked under the sun, and the equipment hummed with quiet urgency. We were set up a few miles away from the blast zone, far enough to not feel the full brunt of it, but close enough that we'd see the explosion in all its terrifying glory. The test was scheduled for noon, and the entire camp seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. There was a lot of chatter among the soldiers, but it was the kind of nervous energy you get when everyone's pretending like nothing out of the ordinary is about to happen. Then it happened. The ground shook, and for a split second everything went still, like the world itself was holding its breath. The detonation was massive. I don't think I've ever felt anything like it before or since. The explosion sent a blinding flash of light across the desert, a white-blue intensity that seemed to burn through my eyelids even though I tried to shield myself. I can't explain it, but in that moment, something felt off. The air felt heavier, like it wasn't the same air anymore. Some soldiers around me started yelling, some froze, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the light. I'm not sure if it was the shockwave or something else, but when the light faded, there were strange figures standing in the distance. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. There were at least 5 of them, humanoid shapes, standing completely, still just watching. They were far enough away that I couldn't make out any details, but I could tell they weren't normal people. They didn't move like humans. It was like they were statues, just frozen in place. But watching us, I felt my stomach drop. A wave of dread sweeping over me. I thought I had to be imagining it. But the other soldiers saw them too. No one spoke at first, but there were nervous glances exchanged, and then someone, one of the guys closest to the blast zone, started to scream. It was a piercing, guttural scream full of panic and fear. I'll never forget the sound of it. The scream cut through the desert silence, and then chaos erupted. A few soldiers ran toward the figures, but they disappeared before anyone could get close. It was like they just faded into thin air, or maybe they never were there at all. But I swear to God I saw them, and so did everyone else who was standing near me. I thought maybe it was the heat, or maybe the radiation from the test was messing with our heads. But even as I thought that, I knew it wasn't. Something about it felt too real. Then things got even stranger. A few hours later, we discovered that one of the soldiers who had been in the immediate blast zone was missing. His name was Mark. He'd been part of the unit that had walked closest to the explosion to set up equipment, and now he was gone. No one could explain it. We searched the area, but there was no sign of him. It wasn't until 2 days later that Mark was found, at least what was left of him. He was miles away from the test site, disoriented, his eyes wide and unblinking. His uniform was singed, but the most horrifying part was his skin. He had deep burns all over his body, but the burns weren't like anything I'd ever seen before. They weren't from fire or radiation. They were these strange, jagged marks, almost like something had scraped the skin right off his body. We tried to get him to speak, but he was incoherent, muttering things about lights and shadows. He kept saying something about them following him. He didn't make any sense, but the look in his eyes, it was like he had seen something that had broken him. It's hard to describe. Even the doctors couldn't make sense of what had happened to him. They said it was just the trauma from the explosion, but I knew what I saw. We all knew, and that wasn't the end of it. Over the next few days, things only got worse. Mark didn't improve. He just kept getting more and more disoriented. But the rest of us couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened out there that we weren't meant to understand. The strangest part was how the atmosphere around the camp changed. It wasn't just the usual post-test tension. There was a feeling, a thick unease that clung to everything. The soldiers who were there with me, the ones who saw the figures too, started talking in hushed tones. Some of them said they saw things in the desert, shadows that shouldn't be there, shapes moving in the corners of their eyes. Others heard strange noises at night, like whispers carried on the wind. But when they turned around, no one was there. I remember waking up in the middle of the night one time, a cold sweat soaking my shirt. I couldn't tell if it was the fear or something else, but there was something wrong. It felt like someone was watching. I'd stand outside for a while, just staring into the dark, trying to figure out if I was losing my mind or if something really was out there. It wasn't just the soldiers either. Some of the higher-ups started getting nervous. They'd come in and out of the tents, speaking in low voices, always glancing around as if they expected someone to be listening. And there was one night that really stuck with me. I was sitting alone by the campfire trying to clear my head when I saw something moving in the distance, just like before. Those figures. But this time, there were more of them, and they were closer. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and the air felt thick, suffocating. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, and tried to focus on what I was seeing, but my mind couldn't make sense of it. There were 4, maybe 5 shapes now just standing there, like they were waiting for us. The same humanoid figures, completely still, but there was no mistaking that they were there. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. One of the figures seemed to move, but it wasn't like how a person moves. It was fluid, unnatural. It glided over the desert floor, as if it wasn't even walking. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but the words wouldn't come. I was paralyzed. The figures didn't approach us, but they didn't leave either. They just stood there, watching, waiting. I could feel their presence in the pit of my stomach, like they were studying us, like we were animals in a cage, and they were the ones in control. And then, just as quickly as they appeared, they were gone. No noise, no flash, just nothing. It was like the desert swallowed them up, and they vanished into the air, leaving nothing behind but an oppressive silence. I stayed out there for what felt like hours, too terrified to move, not knowing what I had just witnessed or if I had imagined it. When I finally went back to camp, my mind was racing. The hairs on the back of my neck still stood up. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. The camp was on edge. People kept looking over their shoulders as if they expected something to happen. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was like something had been broken. Whatever we had seen, It was real, and it had changed everything. Mark wasn't the only one affected. A couple of other soldiers who had been at the blast site started complaining about strange symptoms. Some of them had burns similar to his, these deep, uneven patches of skin, like their bodies had been exposed to something otherworldly. A few of them went to the base doctors, but they didn't get any answers. They were told it was just radiation exposure, but I saw it in their eyes. They knew, just like I did, that this wasn't normal. It didn't feel like anything we'd ever been trained for. It felt like we were dealing with something outside our understanding, and that terrified me. As the days went on, I noticed things started to change in ways I couldn't explain. The soldiers who had been closest to the explosion, those who saw the figures too, started having vivid, unsettling dreams. One guy even started drawing strange symbols in his journal, symbols I'd never seen before. They were alien, and don't say that lightly. There was something about them that gave me chills, like the symbols weren't meant for human eyes. But no one talked about it. We all pretended to just go along with the normal routine. But inside, we were all haunted. And then, just when we thought it couldn't get worse, the nightmares started to bleed into reality. It wasn't just hallucinations or bad dreams anymore. It was real. Something was wrong, and it was coming for us. I remember one night when I was walking back from the mess hall, the moon high above us, casting a faint light across the desert. The air felt heavy, like the night itself was holding its breath. As I walked along the dirt path back to the barracks, I heard something behind me. Soft at first. A rustling sound like someone or something was moving through the sand. I turned around quickly, half expecting to see another soldier, but the area was completely empty. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered, thick and undeniable. I kept walking, but that rustling sound followed me, always just out of sight, like it was keeping pace with me. My heart was racing. I picked up my pace, but then the sound grew louder, closer. I spun around, but there was nothing there. No footprints, no movement in the air, just the endless desert and the eerie quiet of the night. For a few seconds I just stood there, trying to figure out if I was losing my mind, or if there was something out there, something not human. The fear clawed at my chest. I had no idea what I was dealing with. I turned and ran back to the barracks, the sound still echoing in my ears. But when I reached the safety of the building, everything went still again. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there, it wasn't finished with us yet. The next morning, when I tried to talk to the others about what had happened, nobody seemed to care. They were all too focused on the strange things happening to Mark. His condition hadn't improved, and he'd been getting more and more violent. He would scream at nothing, thrashing against the medical staff who tried to restrain him. They kept him isolated, but I saw the look in his eyes every time he passed by. He wasn't the same person. It wasn't just the burns or the trauma from the explosion. It was like his soul had been broken, like whatever he had seen out there. It had changed him. The soldiers who had been with him during the test weren't faring any better. One of them, Jones, I think his name was found staring at the desert for hours, saying he could see the lights again. When someone asked him what he meant, he just muttered something about them being closer now, like they were watching us all the time. It was as if whatever had happened out there wasn't just a one-time thing. It was something that was still lingering, still waiting. I didn't know what it was, but the terror in his voice told me that whatever he had seen, it wasn't natural. I tried to keep my head down, not wanting to draw attention to myself, but I could feel the tension in the air. We were all afraid, but we couldn't escape it. It was too late for that. By the time we got word from the higher-ups that we were being moved out, we all had a sense of dread hanging over us. The mission was officially over, but the unease had only grown. It wasn't just the figures in the desert anymore. It was the lingering sense of something else. Whatever we had done, whatever we had seen, it wasn't over. The military gave us all the standard orders to keep quiet, but we didn't need to be told. None of us would talk about it. And to this day, I can't explain what happened in those days after the explosion, but I know one thing for sure. It wasn't just a bad dream, and it wasn't just radiation messing with our heads. What we saw out there, what happened to Mark and the others, it was real. I've never been able to shake the feeling that it's still out there, that whatever those things were, they didn't just vanish. They're waiting, watching, and no one ever talks about it, but I know I'm not the only one who remembers. I've tried to move on, tried to forget about it all, but every once in a while, I'll catch myself staring into the night sky, and the memories come rushing back. Sometimes when I'm alone, I hear that rustling sound again. It's soft, almost like the wind. But then I remember, there was no wind that night. It's happened more than once since, that feeling of being watched. And I can't shake the fear that they're still out there somewhere. I don't know if it's the result of something in the desert, some experiment gone wrong, or if it was something else entirely. But I can't deny what I saw, and I'm not the only one. Every soldier who was there, every one of us who witnessed those figures, those unnatural movements, we all carry it with us. The military never mentioned it again. They swept it all under the rug, like nothing happened. I've often wondered if it's just me, if I'm going crazy, but the others, Mark's condition, the things he said before he shut down completely, tells me I'm not imagining it. No one ever explained the burns, the strange symbols, or the whispers we heard at night. It felt like we were just pawns in something much bigger, something beyond our understanding. And I don't think we were meant to know. A few years later, I ran into another soldier who had been there with me during the test. He was a wreck, hadn't been the same since. He asked if I remembered the figures in the desert, if I'd seen them too. I said I did. We didn't talk about it for long, didn't need to. We both knew. But he told me something that made my blood run cold. He'd been doing some digging, trying to understand what happened. According to him, there were rumors, stories whispered around the base, about things that shouldn't have been part of the test, things that were never mentioned in the official reports. He said he'd heard from someone who had been high up in the chain of command that we weren't the only ones who had noticed something that day. Something otherworldly had been triggered by the blast, and I swear, just hearing those words made everything feel wrong again, like I'd been right all along, that something out there was waiting for us. I couldn't help but think, what did they wake up in that desert? What did we disturb, and why did it seem like it was following us? I don't talk about it much anymore. I keep it to myself, bury it deep. I have a family now, a life away from all that. But there are nights when I can't help but remember what I saw and what I didn't see. The figures, the burn marks on Mark's body, the strange symbols the soldiers were drawing, these things haunt me. And maybe that's what scares me the most, the idea that whatever we encountered out there is still waiting, still out there in the desert, and that we might have done something to bring it closer. Every time I look at the night sky, I wonder if they're watching, waiting, still out there studying us. And maybe it's just my mind playing tricks, but sometimes I think I hear the rustling again, soft, like the wind. But then I remember, I've heard that sound before. I wish I could forget, but I don't think I ever will. No matter how much time passes, there's a part of me that will always be back there, standing in the desert, staring into the dark, waiting for the figures to return. Second story. The Jungle's Silent Watchers. Vietnam, 1972. I've tried to forget what happened in Vietnam, but the more time passes, the clearer it all becomes. I was there in 1972, part of a small patrol with my friend Huang. We were stationed near a remote village, far from any main road, under the cover of thick jungle. It was a quiet evening, too quiet almost. The air felt heavier that night, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Huang and I were crouched low in the brush, checking our weapons, waiting for the signal to move. The moonlight barely cut through the trees, leaving us in almost complete darkness. I remember the feeling of something wrong. It was a sensation I couldn't shake, like being watched. But when I looked around, I saw nothing. Only the usual sounds of the jungle, crickets, distant animal calls. Then suddenly, the sky above us lit up. It wasn't lightning, though. It was a ball of fire, brighter than anything I've ever seen. It appeared out of nowhere, hanging motionless above the treetops. It was like the sky itself had split open. Huang was the first to react. He was always the braver one, or maybe the more foolish. He jumped up, shouting something, though I couldn't hear him over the deafening hum that started to fill the air. The fireball wasn't a ball of flame. It was more like a massive sphere pulsating with light. And then, without warning, it moved. But it wasn't like anything I'd seen before. It was as if it wasn't even flying. It was more like it was pulling us. I didn't even have time to grab Huang before everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground, my body aching like I'd been hit by a truck, but there was something more, an emptiness. My memory was gone, fragmented like a puzzle with missing pieces. The first thing I realized was that I was alone. Huang wasn't with me. I tried to sit up, but my head spun violently. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, like I had no control over them. I looked around, trying to make sense of my surroundings. I wasn't in the jungle anymore. It was like being in some kind of sterile, unnatural place. The ground beneath me was soft, almost like foam, and the air smelled different, cleaner somehow. I couldn't hear anything, no birds, no insects, just silence. It felt suffocating. That's when I noticed the symbols on my arms, strange glowing markings that weren't there before. At first, I thought it was some kind of injury, but when I tried to scratch them off, they didn't fade. They pulsed with a faint light, as if they were alive. I've never seen anything like it. It wasn't like any writing I recognized, not any human language. I could feel my heart pounding as panic set in. What had happened to me? Where was Huang? Why couldn't I remember anything? My mind felt clouded, as if something was blocking my memories, keeping them just out of reach. I stumbled to my feet, feeling disoriented, my legs unsteady. The strange place around me seemed to stretch endlessly, as if it had no boundaries, no walls, no edges, just a bizarre, empty space. I could hear a faint hum, like a machine in the distance, but I couldn't pinpoint its origin. It was so quiet, so unnervingly still. I kept walking, hoping to find something, anything that could make sense of this nightmare. But after what felt like hours, I found nothing. Just emptiness and the pulsating glow on my arms, which never stopped. It felt like the symbols were trying to communicate with me. I could almost feel them pressing against my skin, like they were trying to tell me something important. But the more I tried to focus, the more my thoughts became jumbled. My head throbbed with a dull pain. I don't know how long I wandered, but when I finally started to feel the ground beneath my feet changing, I realized I was back in the jungle, or at least it looked like the jungle. But everything felt different. The trees were wrong. The air smelled wrong. It was as though I had never really left. But at the same time, it wasn't the same place I had been before. And still, no sign of Huang. My heart raced and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I called out his name, but there was no answer. Nothing. Then I saw something in the distance. A figure, slightly hunched over, moving slowly. My heart stopped for a second. It was Huang, or at least it looked like him, but something about the way he moved, the way his head hung low, made my stomach churn. He was different. The closer I got, the more I could see. His skin was pale, almost gray, like he had been drained of all life. His eyes were wide open, but they were empty, glazed over. And then I saw it. On his arm, just like mine, were the same symbols, glowing faintly. I froze, staring at him, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. He didn't react to me at all. He didn't even look at me. I reached out to him, but when my hand touched his shoulder, he collapsed into the dirt, lifeless. That's when I realized he wasn't the person I remembered. He was just a shell. I didn't know how, but I knew it wasn't him anymore. And then, before I could even process what had happened, everything went black again. I woke up in the same place, that strange empty void that felt more suffocating with each passing moment. My body was exhausted, like it had been through a lifetime of suffering in mere minutes. I could barely move. My muscles were so weak, my head pounding like someone was drilling inside my skull. The memory of Huang, what I'd seen happen to him, was stuck in my mind, a nightmare replaying over and over. But this time, there was no fireball, no glowing sphere. Just the overwhelming sense of wrongness, like something wasn't supposed to be here, or I wasn't supposed to be here. The symbols on my arms had changed. The light pulsed faster now, almost as if responding to my thoughts. I reached up, instinctively touching them, but as soon as my fingers brushed against the skin, I felt it. A sharp jolt, like an electric shock, running through my entire body. I yanked my hand away, gasping, but it didn't stop. The symbols, they were burning now, not physically, but in my mind. They were calling me, pulling me into something. It felt like I was being driven to understand them, like I had no choice but to learn what they meant, what they were telling me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't focus. It was like the harder I tried to understand, the more fragmented my thoughts became, slipping away faster than I could catch them. Hours, maybe days, had passed when I finally felt the sensation of being pulled again. But this time, it wasn't like before. There was no sphere, no glowing ball in the sky. It was more like something inside me was moving, dragging me somewhere I couldn't see. The air shifted around me, pulling at my body, twisting it. And then I saw it. I don't know how, but I could feel that it was there. A figure. Not human. It was tall, its body covered in a dark, smooth skin that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes. I can't describe them. They weren't like anything human. They were huge, black, like endless voids that swallowed everything, and yet somehow I could feel it looking right through me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My body refused to move, like I was paralyzed. The figure stepped closer, its presence overwhelming, and in that moment I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, just a deep, cold emptiness, as if I had no soul left to be afraid. The only thing that registered in my mind was the overwhelming certainty that it knew everything about me. Every fear, every secret, every part of my life, it already knew. And somehow I knew, without a single word being spoken, that I wasn't meant to be here. I wasn't supposed to have seen this, and now I was just lost in this endless, horrible place. The figure leaned down, its cold, dark eyes never leaving mine, and I felt my chest tighten, like I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding, but my body refused to react. It was as if my very existence had been frozen in that instant, trapped in a moment where time didn't exist. It raised one long, thin arm, its fingers stretching unnaturally as it touched the symbols on my skin. As its touch made contact, I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't physical pain, not like anything I've ever felt before, but it was worse. It was like a part of me was being pulled out, like they were taking something, my memories, my humanity. Whatever it was, I felt it leaving me, piece by piece. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the figure pulled away and disappeared. The oppressive atmosphere lifted and I was left there alone, gasping for air, drenched in cold sweat. But when I looked down at my arms, the symbols were gone. Just gone. There was nothing there. I could hardly comprehend what had just happened. I stumbled forward, my head spinning, trying to understand. I felt like a shell of myself. I don't know how I made it back to the village or how much time had passed. Everything felt distorted, like it had been warped. The people I saw were all looking at me strangely. I tried to talk, to explain, but I couldn't form the words. They weren't even asking what had happened to me. They were too afraid to ask, too afraid to know. The days after I returned were a blur. I couldn't remember most of them, and what little I could piece together only made me more confused and terrified. I tried to ask around, to find out if anyone had seen Huang after I'd passed out. But no one had. No one remembered him being with me. They just looked at me with wide eyes, as though I had somehow turned into something wrong. I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. My own mind was slipping away, each moment filled with flashes of images, symbols, and dark shadows. I couldn't even trust my own thoughts. It was as if they were being invaded, replaced by something else. Something that wasn't me. I had nightmares every night, visions of the figure, its eyes staring deep into mine, its cold touch pulling at my soul. But worse than that, I could feel it, even when I was awake. That presence, lurking just outside the corner of my vision, watching me, waiting. I couldn't escape it. The villagers began to distance themselves from me. They whispered about, me behind closed doors, casting fearful glances when I walked by. I was no longer one of them. Something had changed, and no one would talk to me directly anymore. I couldn't blame them. I felt like a stranger to myself, like the person I used to be had been ripped away and replaced with someone else. And then, one night, it happened again. The sky lit up, just like before. It wasn't a fireball this time. It wasn't a sphere of light. It was something far worse, something that tore at the very fabric of my reality. I was sitting in the small hut I had been assigned to, staring out into the jungle. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I kept my head down long enough it would go away. That thing would leave me alone. But it didn't. I didn't even hear the noise at first. It wasn't the same hum I'd heard before. It was deeper, more resonant, almost like a voice speaking without words, reaching directly into my skull. I stood up instinctively, my body trembling as the lights above flickered and then burst into blinding brilliance. I tried to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. They were frozen in place. And then I saw it. The figure, again, standing just beyond the edge of my vision, its shape taller, more distinct than before. This time it wasn't just a presence. It was real. It was physically there, looming, casting an impossible shadow over everything. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. The symbols on my arms, they were back, glowing brightly, pulsing with a strange, unnatural light. And they were changing, shifting, rearranging as though they were alive, responding to something I couldn't understand. That's when I knew it. I knew that whatever had happened to Huang, whatever had happened to me, was not over. It was just beginning. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was raw, like it had been drained of life. My vision blurred, and I felt myself slipping into that same dark void. It wasn't sleep. It wasn't a dream. It was something far worse. The world around me seemed to distort, twisting and flickering like a broken image on an old television. I wanted to move, to do something, but my body was no longer mine. It felt like I was being pulled into the ground, deeper and deeper, until the world above me faded completely. I lost track of time, or maybe time lost track of me. All I could feel was the pressure building around me, pressing in from all sides. The last thing I remember before I blacked out again was that unmistakable hum, the one that filled the air like a living thing, and the cold eyes of the figure staring directly into mine as if it were waiting for something, for me to understand. Or maybe for me to accept. But before I could process anything, the world around me vanished and everything went black. Again. When I came to, I was lying on the dirt once again. My body felt heavy, as though it had been crushed under the weight of something unthinkably large. The first thing I noticed was the silence. There were no birds, no insects, just nothing. I sat up, but everything felt off. Like the ground beneath me wasn't the same, or maybe I wasn't the same. My skin felt foreign to me, as though it didn't belong to me anymore. The symbols on my arms were gone, but something else had replaced them. Scars. Deep, jagged lines that didn't belong to any human injury I'd ever seen. I touched them, and a jolt of cold ran through me, like they were alive, like they were still part of me somehow, even though they weren't. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled beneath me. I could feel the weight of the place pressing against me, pulling at my thoughts. There was a strange, hollow sensation in my chest, like I was empty, like something had been taken from me, something I would never get back. And then, just as before, I felt it. that presence. It wasn't far off, it was close. Close enough that I could feel its coldness creeping into my bones. I tried to turn around, but I couldn't see anything, couldn't make out the shape of what was near. But I knew it was there. I knew it had been watching me, and I knew it was waiting for me to figure it out. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't understand what was happening to me. The days, or what I assumed were days, blurred together in a haze of confusion. The villagers had completely stopped speaking to me. They avoided looking in my direction. I heard whispers behind closed doors, and though I couldn't make out the words, I could feel the fear in the air. I wasn't a man anymore. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't even human, not in the way I used to be. I felt like something had been ripped from me, replaced with an emptiness that I couldn't escape. I wandered the jungle, not really sure why, not really sure of anything. All I knew was that there was no peace for me, no place to hide. The hum, that unbearable hum, was always with me, just beneath the surface of my mind, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. Sometimes I would hear it more clearly than others, like it was coming from inside my own head. But I could never find the source. I could never pinpoint where it was coming from. It was just there, an ever-present reminder of whatever had taken place that night, of whatever I had become. I tried to push it out, tried to tell myself I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew it was real. I knew it was always going to be real. I wasn't going to escape it. One night, after I'd returned to my makeshift hut, I saw something strange in the distance. A light. A flickering glow, much like the one I had seen so many times before. But this time, it wasn't in the sky. It was on the ground, just beyond the edge of the jungle. I couldn't stop myself. I had to see it. I had to know what it was. My heart raced as I stumbled through the brush, each step pulling me closer to the source of the light. When I finally broke through the trees, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, in the clearing, was a large metallic object. It was shaped like a ship, but it wasn't anything I recognized. It wasn't like anything human-made. It was a dull silver gray, with no windows, no doors, nothing to suggest it was a vehicle. It was just there, sitting in the middle of the jungle like it had always belonged. My knees buckled beneath me. I wanted to run. I wanted to turn around and never look back. But something in me, something deep inside, compelled me forward. It was as though I had no choice, as though I had been drawn here for a reason. I took one step toward it, and then another, until I was standing directly in front of it, staring up at the smooth, featureless surface. That's when I heard it again. The hum. But this time it wasn't just a sound. It was like it was inside my head, vibrating my very thoughts. I placed my hand on the metal surface, and as soon as I did, everything around me went still. No animals, no wind, no movement at all. Just an overwhelming silence, as if the entire world had stopped. The symbols on my arms flared up in my mind, and I felt them begin to burn again. But this time it was different. This time I understood them. They were an invitation. They were a calling. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to understand, but I couldn't fight it. I felt the pull, like I was being dragged into the ship itself, no longer in control of my own body. And then, in an instant, I was inside. The world around me dissolved, and I was surrounded by an unearthly glow. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I was trapped in the most horrifying sense, but before I could even process what was happening, I saw something. Someone. Huang. He was there, standing in front of me, his eyes wide open but lifeless, just like before. Only now, he wasn't alone. There were others, figures, humanoid, but not quite. Their features were distorted like reflections in a broken mirror. They surrounded me, their eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a deep, paralyzing fear. This wasn't just a nightmare. This was real. They had come for me. They had taken Huang, and they had taken me. I couldn't speak, couldn't even move as they closed in around me. My body was frozen, and all I could feel was the suffocating weight of their presence pressing in on me from all sides. I was no longer a man. I was no longer human. I had become a part of whatever this was. And then, just as quickly as it had all begun, everything stopped. The hum faded, the figures disappeared, the lights went out, and I was back in the jungle, alone, again. I don't know what happened. I don't know how it ended. I don't know if I'm even the same person anymore. I came back to the village, but it wasn't the same. The people didn't look at me the way they used to. They didn't speak to me. They didn't even acknowledge me. It's like they knew I wasn't the same. I don't know if they saw it, felt it, or if it's just something in my head, but I know what I saw. I know what happened to me. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how far I run, it's always there, just out of reach. Those symbols. Huang's eyes. The hum. They're always with me, lingering in the background, and I know deep down that whatever it was, whatever happened to us that night, isn't over. It hasn't stopped. It's only waiting for me to return. I'll never escape it. Third story. A soldier's abduction. Kosovo, 1999. It was the year 1999, during the height of the Kosovo War. I was a soldier in the Serbian army, stationed just outside of Pristina. The night was heavy with the distant sounds of artillery fire and the low hum of military radios. We were stationed in a fairly remote area, and the skies were overcast. Perfect conditions for an unsettling quiet. We weren't expecting anything out of the ordinary that night. The routine was always the same. Patrols, keeping the radios on, checking the perimeter. But that night, something happened that I can't shake off. Something that none of us in the field could ever explain, and it's something I know still haunts the men who were there with me. We had just finished a short patrol when it started. I can't really pinpoint the exact time. Maybe it was around 10 p.m., maybe a little later, but what struck me was the sudden silence. Not a sound. The usual hum of the radio chatter was gone. Our equipment started malfunctioning, small things at first. Radios turning off without warning, the signal lights on our night vision gear flickering, static covering all frequencies. And then, the feeling, like something was watching us, but not from anywhere we could see. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I turned to my comrades, and they looked just as confused and uneasy as I felt. We didn't say much. There was no need. We were used to the constant tension of war, but this felt different. Then, out of nowhere, we saw it. A shape in the sky, large, triangular, and moving slowly over the battlefield. At first, I thought it was a plane, maybe a NATO aircraft on a routine patrol. But no, it was nothing like anything I had ever seen. The craft was completely black, its edges so sharp it looked like it was cutting through the very air itself. There were no lights, No sounds of engines, nothing. Just this massive black triangle, slowly gliding overhead, almost like it was hovering, taking its time, as if to observe us. My heart started racing, and I could see the fear in my comrades' faces. It wasn't just the sight of it, but the unnatural stillness that came with it. We were soldiers, trained to face fear, but this was something that shook me to my core. I've tried to convince myself it was just a hallucination, some sort of war-induced stress messing with my brain, but I know what I saw. I wasn't the only one who saw it. Everyone in our unit witnessed it, and I saw it reflected in their eyes, the same mix of confusion and dread. The craft hovered for what felt like an eternity. The darkness around us seemed to deepen, like it was sucking the very light out of the night. Then, without warning, the radio crackled to life for a split second, and I heard a voice. It wasn't one of ours, not in the way we would normally communicate. It was distorted, almost like it was coming from another world, another dimension. The transmission lasted only a few seconds, but those seconds felt like they stretched into hours. And then, silence again. Our equipment failed completely. The radios went dead, and any signal we tried to send was cut off. We were isolated, left in the dark with this thing looming above us. As if that wasn't strange enough, things got even worse. I remember looking at the soldiers next to me, just trying to make sense of what was happening. Then, one of them, Sergeant Ivanov, vanished. 1 second he was there, standing next to me, looking up at the craft, and the next, he was gone. No sound, no trace. He wasn't even the first to disappear. Private Nikolov was gone too, and he had been on the other side of the formation. We were all paralyzed with fear, not knowing what was going on. We searched the area, but it was like they had just vanished into thin air, and then, as suddenly as it had started, they reappeared, right back where they had been standing, as if they hadn't been gone at all. But they were different. Their eyes were vacant, their movements stiff. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge what had just happened, and I could see the fear creeping into their faces, as if they were afraid to even talk about it. I wish I could say that the whole ordeal was over after that, but it wasn't. We were still trapped under that thing's gaze, still watching as it drifted silently above us, and for some reason, it seemed like time itself had stopped. My mind was racing. What had just happened? Where had they gone? Why did I feel this cold, empty void in my chest? The craft seemed to almost mock us, floating in the air, taking its time, studying us. A part of me was terrified of the possibility that we were being watched by something that was far beyond our understanding. A force from the sky, a being, or beings, whose motives were as unclear as the black shape above us. At some point, I lost track of time. My sense of reality was slipping. There was no sound, no movement, and I wasn't sure if I was still awake or dreaming. I don't remember who first spoke, but we all began to shout at the sky, trying to make sense of it, to force the world back into something we could understand. But nothing changed. Everything was static, frozen in place, as if the universe itself had pressed pause. We were alone with that thing, alone with whatever it was. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished. One moment it was there, casting a long shadow over us, and the next, it was gone. But the worst part, the part that still eats away at me every day, is this. None of us could remember what happened after it disappeared. The moments that followed were lost to us, as if someone had hit the reset button on our memories. All I know is that I woke up hours later, disoriented and surrounded by my unit. We were back at base, as if no time had passed at all. Everyone was talking over each other, but no one could explain the black triangle. No one wanted to talk about the disappearances, ours or theirs, and we certainly didn't speak about the silence, the feeling of being watched, or that strange transmission. All of it was swept under the rug, and for years I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something we were all too afraid to acknowledge. Something that had come down from the sky, and something that had left its mark on us. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see the triangle hovering over the battlefield, and I feel that same bone-chilling terror. What happened that night, I'll never know. But I can't forget it, and I'll never be the same. It's been years since that night, but the memories still haunt me, and I know it's not just me. I've tried to talk to a few of the others who were there with me, but they always dodge the subject, like it's some kind of unspoken rule. I've even been to therapy since, trying to figure out if it was some form of collective stress or mass hallucination, but deep down, I know it wasn't. There's no way it was. When we were there, in that field, with that thing hovering above us, I felt something shift inside me. I felt small, insignificant, like we were mere ants under the gaze of something far greater. Some of the soldiers never spoke to me again after that. Maybe they were afraid of what they saw, or maybe they were just as confused as I was, but I could see it in their eyes. Fear. Not the kind you get from bullets flying by, but the kind that comes from staring into the unknown, into something that doesn't belong. I've tried to rationalize it, convince myself that it was just a freak accident, some kind of military test or technology that malfunctioned, but the more I think about it, the less likely that seems. The way everything shut down, the way people vanished, and the weird energy in the air. It wasn't something man-made. It felt like it was being controlled by something else, something beyond our comprehension. That craft wasn't a drone. It wasn't any kind of aircraft we had in our arsenal or anything NATO had. It was something else entirely. And to this day I can't escape the feeling that whatever it was watching us. And maybe still is. I wish I could be certain about what happened. I wish I could wake up one morning and say it was just a bad dream. But that's not how this works. The memory is too real. The fear is too real. Even when I'm not thinking about it, that night lingers in the back of my mind, just out of reach, like a shadow that follows me. No matter how much I try to outrun it, I'm convinced there are things out there, things that we don't have the words for, things that exist beyond the reach of our understanding. And I think the worst part is that we, as soldiers, were never meant to see them. We weren't supposed to know they existed, but they do. And now, I carry that knowledge with me every single day. I remember waking up the next morning, surrounded by the rest of the unit, but it felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. We were all there, physically, but something was off. Like we had all been through something so extreme our minds were trying to block it out. I was still in my gear, lying on the dirt, and there was no sign of the craft. It was gone, as if it had never been there in the first place. But I knew it had. I could feel it in my bones. I had the sense that the others were feeling the same way, though nobody said anything about it. We all just pretended it hadn't happened. But the air between us felt thick with unspoken words. I swear, there was a tension that morning I couldn't shake. Like everyone was too scared to ask the questions that were hanging in the air. As the days went on, I tried to push it out of my mind, but there was no escaping it. Every time I looked up at the sky, my heart would race. I'd check the radio, and for a moment, I'd feel that same wave of dread, as if it might crackle back to life again. I started to see things, shapes in the sky, strange flickers on the horizon, but every time I tried to look closer, they'd vanish. I wasn't sure if I was seeing things or if it was my mind playing tricks on me, but the feeling of being watched never went away. And it didn't take long before I realized I wasn't the only one. A few of the soldiers started acting differently, jumpy, paranoid. Some couldn't sleep, others started drinking more. We were all on edge, like we were living in a world that had shifted, that had changed somehow. The way we looked at each other, it wasn't the same. I started to hear rumors, whispers of strange lights in the sky, more disappearances, more soldiers vanishing for brief moments, only to come back with no memory of where they had been. Some even claimed that people had been gone for hours, but when they returned, they had no recollection of what had happened. That was the worst part of it, the memory loss. It wasn't just me, it wasn't just the ones who had disappeared. Everyone who had been there that night, everyone who had seen that craft, felt the same thing. A black hole in their memories, a gap where time should have been. And that's when I realized, whatever happened, it wasn't just physical, it was psychological too. Like they had taken something from us, something we couldn't get back. I thought about going to the higher-ups with my concerns, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. If anything, I'd probably be dismissed, told it was stress or the chaos of the war, maybe even flat out accused of hallucinating. We were in the middle of a conflict that didn't leave much room for doubt, and no one was about to start believing in alien abductions, no matter how real it felt. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been done to us that night. Something that went beyond any military operation or tech malfunction. The disorientation, the vanishing, the emptiness we all felt afterward. There was no way to explain it all away with logic. One night, after a long day of patrols, I was sitting in my tent, alone, trying to force myself to sleep. But I just couldn't shake the nagging feeling in my gut. I kept replaying the events in my head, piece by piece, like trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. That's when I heard it. A low hum, barely audible at first, coming from outside. I froze, trying to tell myself it was just the wind or maybe some equipment malfunctioning again. But no, it was real. The sound was unmistakable. It was the same hum I'd heard that night, the night when that thing had been overhead. The fear came rushing back, colder than before, like it had never left. I grabbed my rifle and stepped outside, my heart pounding, my breath coming in short gasps. The sky above me was clear, no craft, no shadows, just the normal stars and the usual dark. But the hum, it was still there. I looked around, scanning the horizon, but there was nothing, just the same old silence, the same emptiness. And yet, I couldn't shake the thought it was back, or maybe it had never really left. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, staring at the sky, waiting for something to happen. But nothing ever did. The hum eventually faded away, as if it had been a figment of my imagination. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew that whatever had happened to us in Kosovo, whatever had been watching us from the sky that night, wasn't over. It was always there, lurking just beyond our perception. I don't know how or why it happened, but I don't think we were meant to see it. And now, I'm not sure if we were ever meant to leave. Some nights I still hear that hum, and I don't know if I'm losing my mind or if it's something else. In the years that followed, I tried to go on with my life. I left the army, tried to put the war behind me, tried to forget the Black Triangle and the strange events in Kosovo. But you can't outrun something like that. It stays with you. You can try to bury it, but it never truly disappears. There are nights when I'll wake up, drenched in sweat, and feel like I'm still there, still under that thing's watchful gaze. I've had dreams, no, nightmares, where I'm back in that field, staring up at the sky, waiting for it to come down again, but it never does. Instead, I'm left with that same feeling, the feeling that it's always watching, always waiting. I tried to convince myself that it was just a bad experience, something that the stress of war made me imagine. But deep down, I know it wasn't. I've started looking into other similar reports, stories from other soldiers, civilians, even people who weren't involved in the war. And the more I dig, the more I realize I'm not the only one who's had this experience. I found stories from other soldiers stationed in different parts of Kosovo during the same time. People who reported seeing strange lights, hearing strange sounds, and feeling the same eerie stillness that we did. Some of them described the exact same craft I saw, a black triangular object, silent and massive, hovering above them in the dead of night. They didn't want to talk about it either, but the similarities were too striking to ignore. And that's when it hit me. Whatever we saw, whatever happened to us, wasn't just an isolated incident. It was part of something bigger, something far beyond the scope of our understanding. I don't know what it all means. I've tried asking others who were there, but they're either too afraid to talk or too confused to remember anything useful. What happened that night still lingers in my mind, and I can't shake the feeling that I'll never truly understand it. Maybe we weren't supposed to. Maybe there's a reason we can't remember everything, a reason we were left with these gaps in our memories. It's been over 2 decades now, and I've tried to forget, to move on, but I can't. I still feel like I'm being watched, like something is out there waiting. And I can't help but wonder if we're just waiting for the next time it decides to come back. I haven't told anyone about this in years. I've kept it to myself, buried it deep down, but it's always there, in the back of my mind. And now, sharing it with you, I feel a strange mix of relief and dread. Part of me wants to forget it all, but part of me knows I can't. The truth is, whatever happened to us that night in Kosovo was real. It wasn't a dream or some military experiment gone wrong. It was something else, something far more terrifying than I can put into words. And the worst part? I don't think it's over. I've had a lot of time to think about it, to piece things together, and every time I try to make sense of it, I end up with more questions than answers. The thing that sticks with me the most is the silence. It wasn't just the kind of silence you get when everything stops, the hum of machinery, the clanking of metal. It was different. It was a dead silence. The kind that makes you feel like the air itself is holding its breath. And then there was the moment when everything went black. Not just the sky, but everything around us. It was like we were in some kind of vacuum, suspended in time. I remember looking around, seeing the other soldiers frozen, staring up at the object, and it felt like we were all just waiting. For what? I don't know. Maybe for it to leave, or maybe for something worse. I spoke to a guy I served with a couple of years after we got back. He had the same haunted look in his eyes, the same distant tone when he spoke about it. He didn't remember much, just bits and pieces like the rest of us. But there was one thing he told me that shook me to my core. He said he'd seen one of the soldiers from another unit disappear, just vanish, right before his eyes. He said he looked away for a second, and when he turned back, the guy was gone. No trace, no noise, just gone. And then, a few minutes later, the soldier reappeared, acting like nothing had happened, but he was different. He didn't talk about it, but there was something in his eyes, like he'd seen something that had changed him. I don't think he ever told anyone what happened, and I don't think he could. But that wasn't the only thing that freaked me out. The guy said he heard a voice, not spoken but in his head. It wasn't English, it wasn't any language he knew, but he understood it, and it told him something about us being watched. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. The worst part, the thing that haunts me the most, is the feeling that it never really stopped. That night, when that thing was above us, I felt like it had been watching us for much longer than we realized. It wasn't just an accident that we saw it. We were always meant to see it. And now, even though I try to move on with my life, I can't help but wonder if it's still out there, watching, waiting for the right time to come back. And I don't know if I'll ever be ready for that. I've kept a low profile ever since I left the army. I don't talk to many people about what happened, and I sure as hell don't bring it up with my family. It's not something you can explain to someone who hasn't seen it, who hasn't felt it. The truth is, I'm still terrified of what I saw, of what we all saw. Sometimes I think about going back to Kosovo to see if there's anything I missed, something that could explain it all, but I'm not sure I want to know. I'm not sure I want to find out what we really encountered that night. Part of me wonders if ignorance is bliss, if I could just pretend it didn't happen, go on with my life, and forget about the black triangle and the feeling that I'm still being watched. But that's not how it works, is it? Once you've seen something like that, once you've experienced the unexplainable, it's hard to unsee it. It's hard to forget. I still hear stories, not just from Kosovo, but from all over the world. Soldiers, civilians, people who claim to have seen things in the sky, things that don't make sense. Lights, shapes, craft, people who vanish only to return with no memory of where they've been. Sometimes I wonder if it's all connected, if there's a bigger pattern that we're just not seeing. Maybe it's happening more than we realize. And maybe, just maybe, it's happening to people like me. People who thought they could move on, who thought they could escape the memories of that night. But I don't think it's over. Not for me, not for any of us. Whatever it was that we saw, whatever it was that took us, took me, it's still out there. And the worst part is, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to escape it. Maybe someday someone will figure it out. Maybe someone will have the courage to confront it, to look it in the eye and understand what it is. But that's not going to be me. I've come to terms with that. I don't need answers anymore. I just need to live with it, with what I saw, with the lingering feeling that it's never really gone. I don't know if it's watching me right now, if it's waiting for the right time to come back, but I know this. Whatever it is, whatever it wants, it's far beyond anything we understand. And I think that's what scares me the most. I can still hear that hum sometimes, even now. In the quiet moments, when the world seems to stand still. It's faint, barely there, like a whisper in the distance. And I know, deep down, that it's never truly gone. It's just waiting, watching, and maybe one day it will find me again. But until then, I'll keep living with this. I'll keep living with the knowledge that whatever happened that night in Kosovo, whatever was in the sky above us, it wasn't just a moment in time. It was a warning, and I don't think we'll ever fully understand what it was. It's been years now, and the memories still creep in when I least expect it. I try to live a normal life, to move past it all, but the weight of that experience is always there, lurking in the back of my mind. I've tried to speak to others who were there with me to get their side of the story, but every time I do, they act like they don't remember, or worse, they pretend it never happened. But I know they're lying. We all know what we saw, what we felt. They just don't want to face it, or maybe they can't. The fear, the confusion, the not knowing, it's too much to handle. So we push it away, shove it down deep and try to pretend it's gone. But it's not. Sometimes I think about what it would be like if I could just forget it. If I could erase those images from my mind, those black eyes staring down at me, the way the air felt heavy and wrong, the way the ground seemed to hum beneath my feet. But no matter how hard I try, I can't. And every time I close my eyes, I can still see it. The shape, the darkness, the cold. I can't forget the way my body felt when we were all suddenly paralyzed, when everything stopped, when time seemed to freeze. It's like a part of me is still stuck in that moment, still trapped in that night, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to escape it. I've heard rumors over the years, from other soldiers, from civilians, people who've experienced similar things, seen similar crafts, felt the same strange presence in the air. Some say it's a government experiment, something classified and beyond our comprehension. Others say it's extraterrestrial, aliens observing us, studying us, maybe even manipulating us. I don't know what the truth is. I don't know what we saw or who or what was behind it. But I know that whatever it wasn't normal. It wasn't something we were meant to see. And that realization, the fact that there's something out there watching us, waiting for the right moment to make itself known, is what keeps me up at night. The thought that we may be pawns in a game we don't understand, that we've been part of something far bigger than ourselves, is enough to make your skin crawl. I've tried to talk to a few others who experienced it, people who were stationed in Kosovo at the same time. Some of them remember more clearly than others, but no one wants to talk about it. It's like there's a wall, a kind of unspoken rule that says we don't acknowledge it. And I get it. I really do. No one wants to admit they saw something so unbelievable, something so far outside the realm of reality. But the truth is, we all saw it. And the more I dig into it, the more I realize that we weren't the only ones. There are stories from other soldiers, from civilians in war zones, from people all over the world who've experienced similar things. And it's starting to look like we weren't just witnesses. We were part of something bigger, something that might be impossible to explain. I don't know if we'll ever get answers. I don't know if anyone will ever really understand what happened. But I think about it every day. And I wonder if I'll ever get to a point where I can truly move on, where I can look at the sky and not feel that same rush of fear. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to forget the way I felt that night, the way everything stopped, the way I knew something was wrong but couldn't do a damn thing about it. Part of me wishes I could have confronted it, asked it what it wanted, why it was there. But I know I would have never gotten an answer. Whatever that thing was, it didn't come to us for any good reason, and I know deep down that we weren't meant to survive whatever it had planned. I'm getting older now, and part of me wonders if I'll ever see it again. If I'll ever encounter that same black triangle in the sky. If the hum will return. If the feeling of being watched will come back in full force. But the other part of me? The part that knows too much. I don't want to see it again. I don't want to know what it wants. And I don't think anyone else does either. Whatever happened to us in Kosovo, whatever we were part of, is something we can't control. And I'm not sure we ever will. I wish I could say I've made peace with it, that I found a way to live with what happened. But I haven't. And I don't know if I ever will. The memories are still there, haunting me, always lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to rise up again. Maybe that's the worst part. The not knowing. The fact that I'll never have the answers I need. Maybe there's no reason to search for them. Maybe I'm better off accepting that I'll never understand. But I can't stop looking over my shoulder, can't stop wondering if one day I'll see that shape in the sky again, or hear that hum from the darkness. I'm not sure what it wants, or why it came to us. But I know it's not done with us. Not yet. It never will be.